This is Reverend Dr. Ebenezer Markwei of Living Streams International, bringing you a few thoughts concerning everything that we've been through, especially in the lockdown. You know, today I like to call it the blessing of the solitary. That is, the blessings that are inherent sometimes when we are alone. You know, this pandemic, there was a lockdown and it forced us to be by ourselves. And we cut out, we were talking to friends, of course, on the phone and all those things. But majority of the time, we were by ourselves and we were alone. And I can tell you that there were times where people were bored. Yes, I was bored a couple of times, but I engaged more in reading so I could catch up with a lot of things. I had slackened on my reading a little bit. So this period was good for me to read. But then there's a blessing in the solitary. And sometimes God even wants us to be alone in order to bring some things to us. You'll be very, very surprised, but there are very powerful revelations which are obtained not in the company of other people, but sometimes when you're alone. There are very powerful principles that are imbibed not when we are with people, but sometimes when we are by ourselves. I remember a story of a man called Moses, one time walking at the backside of a desert alone. And then all of a sudden, he saw a bush that was burning. And at that burning bush, God then spoke to him and said, "Now, Moses, this is me." And the Bible says Moses decided to turn aside. He left the flock, he left the sheep, and he left everybody else in order to draw closer to that burning bush. And that was when God spoke to him, and God gave him three things. Those three things are powerful. And there are three things that we can come into, three revelations or three principles that we can have when we are alone. Because what? Sometimes when we're alone, it brings us to the place called examination, or it brings us to the place of evaluation. First of all, we examine ourselves, and then we evaluate our life, we evaluate the things that we have called important and all those other things. That's so examination and evaluation. That's what we do sometimes when we're alone. And God pulled Moses aside because God wanted Moses to come into three things, three informations, three powerful informations. When Moses turned aside, then God said, "Okay, now Moses, I want to show you who I am." So for the very first time, Moses said, "God, who is talking to me?" And he said, "I am that I am." So Moses came into a revelation or came into information on who God is. In this period, each and every one of us must have had an experience or must have an occasion to find out who God is. And that's what Moses did. He found out who God is, and once you find out who God is, you will find out who you are. Because this lockdown gave us an insight into who we really are. What matters to us? Is it the drinking? Is it the friends? Is it the debauchery? Is it whatever? You will find out who you are. Because it was when Moses met God, when he found out who God was, then God said to him, "Okay, now, this is who you are. You are not a shepherd boy. You are a deliverer and a judge." So sometimes the solitary brings us to a place of examination, brings us also to evaluation of life, examination of who we are, examination of even who God is. And God is not afraid to be investigated. So he gives us power to investigate. So here is the principle. Number one, Moses found out who God was. Number two, he found out who he was, Moses was. He thought he was a failure, but he wasn't a failure. That was when he came into self-discovery. Then the third principle, which is very, very powerful, that he said to God, Exodus 4, he said, "What tools do I have to be able to fulfill my destiny or to fulfill the purpose for my life?" Then God said, "What do you have in your hands?" So, number one, discovery of God. Number two, discovery of yourself. And number three, discovery of the tools that you have, that God has given you. You know, everyone may have a gift, everyone may have a talent, or everyone may have a grace upon your life. Your talent you were born with. Your gifting you were gifted from above. Your grace is what God gives you to take your talent and your gifting beyond your four walls. This is what Moses came to. You can also have the same experience. If this lockdown period has been, I hope it has been an evaluative time. I hope it has been an examination time. I hope it has been a time where you will sit down, evaluate your life, prioritize on God, prioritize on who you are, and prioritize on the gifts that God has given you for you to be a blessing unto humanity. So, the blessing of a lockdown, is in the solitary, the principles of the solitary. God bless you as we meet another time.